Open this up, we could have gone to a couple of different texts, especially in the Psalms, about this idea. And Israel was always, if you read through the Kings and the Chronicles, when they got in trouble, they were always at war. Sounds like today. Always at war with the nations around them. And they often had the temptation, of course, they were led by a king, to make a pact with one of the other nations against this nation that was warring with them, and to trust in those people and their chariots and armies rather than to trust in God. And some of the times the king did trust in God. There's a couple instances where God just did intervene and he took care of it. And that was what they wanted, or what God wanted them to do. But here we read in Isaiah 31, "Woe to those who go down to Egypt for help and rely on horses, and trust in chariots because they are many, horsemen because they are very strong." And this was often what Israel did. We got to get a big army up here because, we're fighting Edom, we're fighting Aram, or whoever it was. Sometimes it was Assyria. But they do not look to the Holy One of Israel, nor seek the Lord. Yet he also is wise and will bring disaster, and does not retract his words, but will arise against the house of evildoers and against the help of the workers of iniquity. In other words, God will do what's right, but you got to look to him. Verse 3 is so telling. Now the Egyptians are men and not God. Wish we could only remember that. And their horses are flesh and not spirit. Had a lesson a couple weeks ago about the supernatural, didn't we? So the Lord will stretch out his hand, and he who helps will stumble, and he who is helped will fall, and all of them will come to an end together. So God will take care of it. The battle, again, is a spiritual battle, no matter what kind it is. The evil one is the one who is bringing harm, trouble, disaster. He's always behind it. He always is. And we have to remember that even as we were studying in our Bible class this morning. So let's go to 1 Chronicles 21. This is David, by and large, was a man who trusted God. In fact, in another place, it says he was a man after God's own heart. But today we're going to see that David made a huge mistake. That at this point in his life, he began to trust not in God, but in the size of his army. And he paid a great price for it. So let's see what we can learn from this narrative about David. 1 Chronicles 21 and 1. Then Satan stood up against Israel and moved David to number Israel. The parallel, you can read the parallel narrative in 2 Samuel 24, says that again the anger of the Lord burned against Israel. So we don't get some specifics here, but evidently Israel was doing wrong again for whatever reason, and God was upset with them. And so he unleashes Satan again against them through David. And this kind of reminded me of the whole Job thing, right? Where Satan had come before God and said, well, you're protecting Job. And God says, well, okay, well, you go ahead and do this and that, but just don't kill him. It kind of reminded me of that situation. The one translation says that Satan incited David, or urged him, or moved him to do what he was going to do to number Israel. It was a temptation. That's what it was. As we've said before, Satan cannot make us do anything. He can put us in situations. He can kind of put things before us. I don't even know if he can actually put thoughts in our head, but he can stir us up through different people and events and whatever to make us choose. You're going to keep doing what's right, or you're going to go down this path. So whatever he did here, and we're not told, David chose wrong. What was wrong with taking a census? Well, the main point was, and we're going to read the next section, David wanted to know how many men he could have in his army instead of trusting in God. Let's read on, verse 2. So David said to Joab was a general of the army, and to the princes of the people, go number from Beersheba even to Dan, and bring me word that I may know their number. That was the bad thing. God always said, you don't need to know numbers. He'd even told one king who had already hired an army, he says, you don't need that army, let them go. You can read it all through the Old Testament. Verse 3, Joab said, may the Lord add to his people 100 times as many as they are, but the Lord, my king, are they not all my Lord's servants? Why does my Lord seek this thing? Why should he be a cause of guilt to Israel? Joab understood this wasn't right, and Joab didn't always get it right either if we read the Old Testament. But here he did. He says, David, this is not right. You don't need to do this. Nevertheless, the king's word prevailed against Joab. Therefore Joab departed and went throughout all Israel and came to Jerusalem. Joab gave the number of the census of all the people to David. And all Israel were 1,100,000 men who drew the sword, and Judah was 470,000 men who drew the sword. You see, that was what he wanted to know. How many can I put in my army? But he, meaning Joab, did not number Levi and Benjamin among them, for the king's command was abhorrent to Joab. Joab knew this was wrong. So maybe he's thinking, if I don't number all of Israel, the Lord won't take it the wrong way, because I left out these couple of tribes here. Maybe that's Joab's thinking. I don't know. But whatever, he didn't do it all because he thought this is just wrong. That we should number the people. We don't know what David was thinking about. There's nothing here about was he going to attack somebody? Was somebody attacking them? It's just not there. But he wants to know numbers and not trust in God. He wants to know how many troops. I almost titled this sermon, Guns or God. And I know sometimes you need to have an army, and we can't be foolish, but even if you have an army, you have to trust God first of all. Because we know there's been a lot of large armies that lost to smaller armies. God can bring about whatever he wants to do to accomplish his will. 2 Samuel 24 says this census took 9 months and 20 days. They didn't have the computer systems, they didn't have cars to drive around. They had to probably walked a lot or maybe ride on their donkey and go through all the country. Of course, even if you look at a map today, Israel's not that big. 9 months to do all this. What a waste of time and a waste of manpower to number all these people. But David wanted it done. Verse 7. God was pleased with this thing. I would hate to have that written about me. So he struck Israel. And I think that's leading us to where we're going now. It doesn't say specifically at that point, but this is what's coming. If we can get the page turned here. There we go. David said to God, so evidently God had talked with David, said, you've done wrong, prepare yourself, you're going to suffer. David said to God, I've sinned greatly in that I have done this thing. But now please take away the iniquity of your servant, for I have done very foolishly. David had done foolishly before with the situation with Bathsheba and Uriah. But here was another thing that he had done wrong, very wrong. I was reflecting on this. Often this is the case. When you're right in the middle of doing something that's wrong, you don't think. Do you ever consider that? You're really moved by passion or anger or lust or something, and you just got that narrow vision. This is like, I want to do this. And you're not thinking at all about what's right. But then when it's over, when you've done that thing, whatever it is, and then you step back and you start to think and your conscience kicks in and you go, what did I just do? Did you ever do that? What did I just do? And that's what apparently happens with David. He's so focused, I want to know how many troops I can put in the field. And then when he gets all the numbers in and God kind of clicks in and says, David, you did wrong. David's like, oh, you're right. I should never have done that. David wants the forgiveness for his foolish deed, for not trusting in God. And in not trusting in God, he set a bad example for his people. And he wasted all that time and manpower doing his census. Not a good thing to David. Verse 9, we're going to see God's graciousness here, despite his anger with David. The Lord spoke to Gad, David's seer, saying, go and speak to David, saying, thus says the Lord, I offer you 3 things. Choose for yourself one of them, which I will do to you. Wouldn't that be nice if God would say that to us today when we messed up? Now, here's your choice. I'll do this, this, or this. Now, he doesn't do that today, but maybe in his mind he's thinking, well, I could do this to Jeff or that to Jeff or whatever, and we trust God in his graciousness. So Gad came to David and said to him, thus says the Lord, take for yourself either 3 years of famine or 3 months to be swept away before your foes while the sword of your enemies overtakes you, or else 3 days of the sword of the Lord, even pestilence in the land, and the angel of the Lord destroying throughout all the territory of Israel. Now therefore consider what answer I shall return to him who sent me. So God is gracious in giving David a choice. But if we notice carefully, this is also a test. Will you choose the right one? Will you choose to trust me? That's what this is about. Will you trust in your enemies and the nations around you to show you mercy if your country has no food for 3 years? We've never experienced famine in this country, at least the people sitting in this room. I don't know what that would be like when you just really didn't have hardly anything to eat. People get really desperate when things like that happen. We kind of went through a little bit of that with the supply chain thing when we had the COVID deal. And How many of us panicked when we couldn't find toilet paper? Let alone something to eat. So, we're very vulnerable in situations like that. Or, of course, as he said, there you go. What was it, 3 months? Running before your enemies. They're going to run you off the field no matter what you do, no matter what size your army is. You want to do that? You want to trust them? Trust in yourself that you can beat that army? When I've said that they're going to defeat you, you see the conflict there? Or the pestilence with the angel of the Lord killing for 3 days. Will you trust me that I'm a merciful God? Verse 13, David said to Gad, I'm in great distress. Please let me fall into the hand of the Lord, for his mercies are very great, but do not let me fall into the hand of man. David chose right this time. He said, I'm going to trust God. I'll trust those 3 days in the hand of God before any of this other. See what he will do. Verse 14. So the Lord sent a pestilence in Israel. 70,000 men of Israel fell. And as I was reviewing this, last night, actually, it came to me, you know what? He hit David right where David had sinned, because every one of the translations says that was men. 70,000 men who could draw the sword were killed by God. Wow. He knows how to hurt us, make us think. And rightly so. So we'll do the right thing. So we'll understand he's God. He knows us, every one of us. And God sent an angel to Jerusalem to destroy it. But as he was about to destroy it, the Lord saw and was sorry over the calamity and said to the destroying angel, it is enough, now relax your hand. And the angel of the Lord was standing by the threshing floor of Ornan, the Jebusite. So here is God's mercy. This translation says God was sorry. I think other translations says God relented, a word like that. That 70,000 are dead already. He said, that's enough. We don't need any more. That's God's mercy. You see, David was right. Now we might say, wow, 70,000, that's an awful lot, but wonder how many would have died in a 3-year famine. We could just speculate. And David is going to be given another opportunity here to show his heart. Verse 16. David lifted up his eyes and saw the angel of the Lord standing between heaven and earth and heaven with his drawn sword in his hand and stretched out over Jerusalem. I just wonder what that looked like. Whew. And there's not a thing you could do about it. Nothing. Except pray, which is what they did. There's nowhere you or I have any power whatsoever to stop an angel that is going to do what he's going to do. Wish we could really remember that. And that's just one. That's just one. Jesus talked about calling legions of angels, but he didn't. Anyway, that's another story. Then David and the elders, covered with sackcloth, fell on their faces, humbled themselves, prayer. God, we've sinned. And David said to God, Is it not I who commanded to count the people? Indeed, I am the one who has sinned and done very wickedly. But these sheep, what have they done? O Lord my God, please let your hand be against me and my father's household, but not against your people, that they should be plagued. I think this shows David was truly repentant. He understood what he had done when he says, Father, these people should not be suffering. Let this all be on me and my household. Of course, it was kind of too late for that, but it showed he got the message. And here's a message for us from this. Whatever we do affects somebody else. I don't care who you are. It affects them for good or bad, for shame or glory. Might be a lot of people, might be few, but it affects somebody else. I was reflecting on this, Shirley and I are still kind of chips off the old block, the real old block. We still get a newspaper. And you read in there about kids participating in these contests. They just had one about robotics, how the parents must have been really proud for them that they were doing that in this contest. Young man just won the spelling bee here. They have that every year, and he's going to Washington, and their parents probably, hey, that's a wonderful, great thing. And of course, you see all these kids signing these letters of intent to play sports at some college, and the kids, parents excited about that, and teachers and all. And then there's this one young man, next county down, 21 years old, arrested for trying to have sex with a minor. Think how that affected his family and that child's family. 21. And his life is going to be messed up, probably. Hopefully for a long time. Maybe not for the rest of his life. Maybe he can turn it around, but still, what we do affects other people. I don't care who you are. And David's acknowledging that. Why should these sheep suffer for what I did? But it's a fact of life. So when we do things, let's remember that. Let's remember that we are, whether it's our family, our husband or wife, children, extended family, the church, your team that you're on, your classmates, whatever it is, what you do affects them in some way. Romans 14:7 says, one of us lives for himself and not one dies for himself. In some translations there have not one lives to himself or dies to himself, and it's true. We don't. We're part of many communities. Back to 21 and 18. Then the angel of the Lord commanded Gad, the seer, to say to David that David should go up and build an altar to the Lord on the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. So David went up at the word of Gad, which he spoke in the name of the Lord. Now Ornan turned back and saw the angel, and his 4 sons who were with him hid themselves, and Ornan was threshing wheat. As David came to Ornan, Ornan looked and saw David and went out from the threshing floor and prostrated himself before David with his face to the ground. David was the king, that's what you did. And David said to Ornan, give me the site of this threshing floor, that I may build on it an altar to the Lord. For the full price you shall give it to me, that the plague may be restrained from the temple. So atonement had to be made for this sin. Despite David saying, he had done wrong, there still had to be atonement made. And that's why the angel commands for the altar to be built. Nothing short of sacrifice on the altar on this piece of ground will stop this plague. This is what God demands. He says, I understand, David, that you are remorseful and repentant, but still, because of the sin, there must be sacrifice made. That's always the case. Sin requires a blood sacrifice for it to be removed, or in this case, atonement made. So, David talks about giving full price to pay Ornan for his threshing floor there. Let's read on. Ornan said to David, take it for yourself, and let my lord the king do what is good in his sight. See, I will give the oxen for burnt offerings, and the threshing sledges for wood, and the wheat for the grain offering. I will give it all. But King David said to Ornan, no, but I will surely buy it for the full price, for I will not take what is yours for the Lord, or offer a burnt offering which costs me nothing. So David gave Ornan 600 shekels of gold by weight for the site. A couple of great lessons here from these two men at this point. Ornan proves to be an honorable man. He wants to give the whole thing. He understands the situation. We're in trouble. There's an angel standing there with the sword, and we need a place to sacrifice, and you've been commanded by God to take my place to put this altar. He says, take it. I'll give everything. Wow, what a man. What a lesson. How many of us just want to hold back from God? We really don't want to give. We want to keep so much for ourselves. I could go on about that. But he was right. We've got a problem here. I'm going to give what needs to be to resolve this. But David wouldn't have him giving it. Now, as king, he could have taken it. But he shows himself again to be honorable at this point. He says, no. He says, I'm going to pay full price. And I love that thought there, where it says, I will not take what is yours for the Lord, or offer a burnt offering which costs me nothing. And how many of us kind of just want to get by in serving the Lord? Just pay the minimal. Just offer the minimal. Whether we're talking money or time or sweat or whatever, we just want to kind of slide by. David says, no, I'm paying the full price for this threshing floor. Great lesson there. Serving the Lord will always cost us something. And in the past, it's cost some people everything, even their lives. Verse 26. Then David built an altar to the Lord there and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. And he called to the Lord, and he answered him with fire from heaven on the altar of burnt offering. The Lord commanded the angel, and he put his sword back in its sheath. And so the plague was stopped, but not without great cost. So the death, not only of the 70,000, but now in atonement, the death and the lives and the blood of these sacrificial animals was required to stop the plague. Now for the last scripture, let's go over to 2 Chronicles 3. And again, we're amazed at how God works. because this was a foreshadowing of something else. Second Chronicles 3:1. Then Solomon, this is David's son, began to build the house of the Lord, that's the temple, in Jerusalem on Mount Moriah, where the Lord had appeared to his father David at the place that David had prepared on the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. And he began to build on the second day in the second month of the 4th year of his reign, a place where sacrifices would be offered morning and evening, day in and day out, for the sins of Israel. God had a plan. In whom do I trust? In whom do I really trust? We need to answer that question. Maybe that's a question to ask when we get in a situation. Say, Lord, help me to trust you. Say a prayer. Lord, how will I get through this? What should I do? Help me to trust you more. And then also understand, serving God will cost us. I don't know what, but we're supposed to be ready to give whatever is needed to help out in a certain situation. And just be ready for that. New Testament talks about being ready for every good work. Whatever's we can do, whatever's happening, whatever's going on, that I'm ready. I'm going to trust God. I'm going to give what's necessary, and we'll trust him to bring out a good outcome. God bless you as you take this spiritual journey, that you learn to trust God more. Thank you.